The door creaked open, the rusted hinges shrieking against the absolute silence of the room. May stood frozen on the threshold, her knuckles white as she gripped the antique watch. The air inside felt thick, stagnant, and impossibly heavy. She took a step forward, but the floorboards groaned under her weight, echoing too loudly in the confined space. Then, the silence broke. A low, rhythmic thrumming began to pulse through the floorboards, vibrating upward through the soles of her boots. It was not a sound, but a physical pressure, a heartbeat that did not belong to her. May pressed her back against the doorframe, her breath hitching. As the shadows at the far end of the room began to coalesce, a figure emerged, its edges blurring and sharpening like a dying light bulb, struggling against a failing current. It stood perfectly still, yet its silhouette flickered, casting disjointed shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper. May tightened her grip on the watch, her pulse racing in time with the thrumming floor. The figure did not speak, but its presence filled the room. The figure moved forward, his gait fluid and unnatural, lacking the friction of a living stride. As he stepped into the sliver of moonlight, the shadows fell away. His eyes were not eyes at all, but twin voids of absolute darkness, and from his limbs trailed thin gray wisps of smoke that dissipated before they touched the floor. May tried to speak, but the air in the room felt too dense to push through her throat. She gripped the watch until the metal bit into her palm. The figure stopped, his presence radiating a cold, absolute authority that made the room feel suddenly, violently small. A distorted, metallic voice echoed from everywhere at once, vibrating against her teeth. "You have broken the laws of existence." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and final. May stumbled back, her boots scraping harshly against the floorboards. She clutched the watch to her chest, her knuckles raw. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The guardian did not blink, his hollow gaze fixed on the watch. May forced her chin up, her eyes stinging. "I only wanted to fix things. I just wanted to bring her back." The words spilled out, desperate and jagged. She did not care about the cold or the void in his eyes anymore. The guardian remained motionless, his smoke-like form swirling in the stagnant air. The guardian did not move. He simply tilted his head, the smoke trailing from his limbs curling into the stagnant air. "No one alters the flow of time without paying the toll," he replied, his voice a metallic rasp that seemed to vibrate inside May's own skull. He gestured with a long gray finger toward the center of the room. Suddenly, the air fractured. Light bent and twisted, coalescing into dozens of translucent, flickering projections. May gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She saw herself in a dozen different rooms, each one a mirror of her own failures. One version of her wept in an empty kitchen, clutching a cold, unmoving watch. Another stared blankly at a wall, her face a smooth, featureless surface. A third version simply faded into gray mist, dissolving into nothingness. "Every change creates a fracture," the guardian explained, his voice devoid of pity. "Every fracture demands a sacrifice." She did not vanish, May. She was erased to balance the scale of what you stole. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. May stared at the shifting ghosts of her own failures, her breath hitching in her chest. The guardian leaned in until his face was inches from hers, his hollow eyes reflecting only the void. "Eventually, the debt will be paid with you," he whispered. May looked down at the watch in her hand. Its gears were spinning in reverse, a frantic, metallic clicking that vibrated through her bones. She wiped her eyes, her jaw tightening until her teeth ached. "I will not stop," she said, her voice steadying. "Even if I disappear, I will find her." A slow, jagged smile spread across the guardian's face. "Then the game begins." The watch in her hand suddenly surged with a blinding white-hot light. The metal casing expanded, turning into a swirling vortex. It lunged forward, wrapping around her arm. The room shuddered once, a deep, structural groan that vibrated through the floorboards. Then, it snapped. The blinding vortex of gears and shadow collapsed inward, drawn into the metal casing of the watch. With a sharp, final metallic click, the device sealed itself shut. May was gone. The air, thick with the scent of ozone and ancient dust, began to settle. The flickering projections of her erased selves vanished, leaving the space hollow and cold. Moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating the spot where she had stood only seconds before. Now, there was nothing but the floorboards, scarred by the gouges of her struggle. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. It lasted for a heartbeat, then two. Then, the watch began to tick. The game had begun, and in the dark, the clock continued its relentless, eternal beat.